What is up guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be doing some test hands again for the magical musketeers. This time we're going to be going second and seeing how this deck actually performs in a different state. What I mean by this is that by going second, this deck will definitely have to try a few alternative plays that work differently from how you would play if you were going first. When you're going first, you're trying to actually set up a board that allows you to respond to your opponent, disrupting their plays and allowing you to follow up on the next turn. However, since you're going second, your opponent is now doing the complete opposite. You're now in the position where your opponent actually sets up first and can actually respond to what you're doing, potentially disrupting you. So we're just going to run down a few different plays and see how things actually turn out for this deck. Ideally, I do prefer that this deck goes first, but going second, we still can definitely make some plays. But before we get started, I would like to remind you guys to drop a like, share, comment and subscribe if you end up enjoying this video, and hit that bell notification as well, it really does help. Roughly 60% of you aren't even subscribed to this channel, so please do, it really does help produce the quality content. But without further ado, let's just begin. Alright, so here's our opening hand. Obviously you could see that it does kind of look a bit dull in terms of what we actually have here because we don't have much to work with. But I think it's okay because we are going second, so we are trying to get as many monsters out on the board, which is definitely okay. So in this case, we could start out by normal summoning out our Starfire, which is definitely okay of course. So in this particular circumstance, what are we going to do here? I'm thinking, well, we could actually just link away. So what I'll do is I'll link away our Starfire, allowing us to actually go for max, which is definitely still quite a nice move. Now in this circumstance, it is very difficult to actually assume what your opponent will have, but I kind of have to do this whole guesswork just because it's pretty much how the deck works. Now with max, fortunately this card actually works pretty well going second, which is one of the reasons why I never actually went into it going first. There was no reason to. You depended on what your opponent would actually have. So although it could be a contradiction to the actual build itself in some sort of small manner, this card actually, if anything, adds more variation to this deck. It gives the deck the option to go both first and second, because by going first, you're going to be going with your Ties of the Brethren plays, but with going second, max can actually allow you to just add resources based on what your opponent already has out on the field. And since we are going second, we are assuming what our opponent would already have on the board is either going to be monsters or spells and traps. Now, in the more realistic situation, the opponent is unlikely to have any spells or traps. They're more likely to have monsters, so because of that, I'm going to be responding with them actually having the monsters. So in that particular circumstance, max can add spells and traps from your deck, at least magical musketeer traps or spells, and that's going to be based on how many monsters your opponent will have on their board. Now I think a fair number would actually be 2, but your opponent could potentially have 3 or maybe even 4 monsters. If that's the case, it benefits you. Otherwise, you get to add 2 cards at the very least, because that's kind of the standard you would expect out of most decks out there. So with that being said, I'm going to add at least 2 different spells and traps and see how we work there. We do have steady hands, so I'm thinking let's go for at least the 1 cross domination. And since we don't have last stand, I'm thinking maybe we could even go for last stand. Though we could easily go for Desperado as well and pop one of their cards, that would be nice. It just gives us a bit of more variety in this particular circumstance. So what I'll do here is I'll go with Charge into the Dark World, and this will allow us to actually bring back your Starfire, and from that we could discard our own Starfire from the hand as well, which is very nice of course. And now that we have Starfire out on the board, we could either go for steady hands or we could go for cross domination. Now Starfire is the stronger one in this particular circumstance, so I will actually go for the steady hands, boosting up our Starfire, and this will essentially allow us to then special summon a magical musketeer from our deck in defense from Starfire's effect. So in this particular case, we're going to go for, I don't know, Casper. I think that's definitely a really good move here, because what we're going to do here is we're going to take Casper and we want to trigger that off in some sort of way. So I'm going to activate Despair and get rid of one of your opponent's cards, and even if it doesn't, you're at least forcing a negate to actually be used up, so that's great. But that will also trigger off Casper's effect, allowing you to then potentially search again. So in this case, this time maybe you want to add, I don't know, I mean, how about we go for a Last Stand this time, right? So where is Last Stand? Where is it? Over here. So we have Last Stand, which is potentially a negate now, definitely fantastic of course. But what we essentially have to work with here is a lot of these. We could take the Casper and the Max and simply just link those away, allowing us to go for Link 2 monster. So what do we actually want to go for? I mean, it's up to you really. You have Cerberus to pop more spells and traps, which would be fantastic of course. So you could pop one of their monsters, get rid of one of your cards of course, whichever one is necessary in this particular case. I mean, you have them permanents to potentially negate your opponent anyway. But let's say it was a Crackdown, then yeah, you could just get rid of this, pop one of their cards, fantastic, right? But from that, we could still go with a Monster Reborn here. So if we go for Monster Reborn, we bring back one of our extra monsters anyway. We link them away, and this will allow us to then go for a a Unicorn. And you could just discard one more card and spin one of their cards back into the deck. So you're emptying out their deck. You could go for Cross Domination in this case, and if they try to negate, you have the Last Stand to stop them. Otherwise, if you know they have no negates whatsoever, then you get rid of your Last Stand, spin one of their cards, go for your Cross Domination to weaken their monsters, and go for the attack, which would be 2600 plus the 2200, so that makes it 4800. Definitely not too bad at all, because you're halfway there to actually getting rid of your opponent. And in this particular circumstance, you've already got rid of so many resources on their field, so they are definitely in a lot of trouble. Whereas you at least still have this to respond with, and Starfire can trigger off more cards to continue your plays. Alright, so this is definitely very interesting. So we have over here 2 copies of Impermanence, technically, because this is meant to be Impermanence. So we could have negated one of our opponent's cards, definitely fantastic there. But now on our turn, we can activate the Pot of Desires. So what I might do here is first go for the Casper, and then activate your Pot of Desires of course, triggering off Casper, but at the same time also going for your Banish. So I'm going to banish off 10 here, and we're going to draw 2 cards. Let's see what we actually banished off. We banished off Ash, another Desires, Kid Brave, Ash, another Kid Brave, wow, 2 Cross Dominations, Starfire, another Impermanence, and a Last Stand. Not bad there. But we have over here a Desperado and also a Monster Reborn. Alright, so in this particular case, what can we actually go with here? Well, Casper is going to activate first, allowing us to search for whatever we want. We do have a Casper here, so that's nice, but I'm thinking in this particular case we definitely have to add something that is a bit different in this case. I'm thinking maybe we could go with... Should I go with Yugioh? I mean, Yugioh is not necessarily the worst card, but it also doesn't really generate us too many other cards in response to that. I mean, I could still go for the Yugioh, don't get me wrong, and I think I might just do that. So I'll bring out Yugioh, and that would obviously get rid of the Casper. And now that Yugioh is out, we could then go for potentially a Monster Reborn as well. Bring back the Casper, you know, that's definitely very nice. Link away the Casper, and this would allow us to then go for your Max over here, which is definitely fantastic of course, because this can allow you to search. Now in this particular case, similar to the first test hand, it's really hard for me because it's technically just a guessing game as to what I can add with Max. So I guess to keep up with the variety here, I'm going to assume they have spells and traps this time, so I'll just add some monsters. Not that it really matters anyway, because I can't activate anything, But if you think about it in a more realistic sense, you would assume that your opponent actually has monsters on the board rather than spells and traps, because that's the more realistic approach to things, you know, that's what makes sense. So if you look at it in that particular sense, you could add spells and traps, which would be quite amazing, because I want to make the most out of yugioh. So in this particular case, let's just go for steady hands and let's go for cross domination. Just being a little bit like fair here, I didn't want to make it the best case scenario, because let's say your opponent had 6 monsters on the board, then you could potentially add 6 cards to your hand, which I think is obviously a bit too broken, of course, but that's assuming you have the best case scenario. But it could also be the worst case scenario as well, so do keep that in mind. But let's say it's just 2 cards on the board, so we can add these 2. Then in this case, you basically have technically 4 cards, because you can't really activate the second one anyway. So you have these 4 cards to just activate and kind of force out some different things that happen. And then at the end of the turn, yugioh will just add you more cards from the deck to your hand, and that would replenish yourself to actually respond to the opponent on the following turn. Meanwhile, all of these cards here, plus all of these guys over here, will easily just deal with all of your opponent's resources currently on the board. So this deck is not only consistent in the sense that you just could replenish all of this using yugioh's end phase effect, but also in this particular circumstance, get rid of all of their resources with these cards as well. This one obviously will weaken their monster, dropping it down to 0, so even Max could get over it. This here will double your yugioh's attack, allowing it to get over pretty much one other monster, and also dish out a huge amount of damage, because it will essentially be at 5k. And with Desperado popping one of their cards, Impermanent also just negating one of their cards at the ready as well. And it's just all really amazing resources here, and the management is definitely fantastic with all of this, and it just depends on what your opponent actually has as a result. But they're going to have a hard time actually recovering after you are done with this particular board. You're not winning by OTKing your opponent, you're winning by actually getting rid of their resources while maintaining your own, and they're most likely just going to end up scooping the match. Alright, so here's our opening hand. Very interesting. We could still definitely play this off in some sort of way. It's just not the most ideal 2 cards we drew into. But we could potentially like negate one of our opponent's cards, stopping them in some sort of way. That's great with the Impermanence. But on our turn, we could easily just go for the Pot of Desires. Neither of these cards here could actually respond, so either way, we're just going to go for 5 over here. Another 5 over here, and then we'll draw 2 cards. So let's see what we got rid of. Got Desperado, Cross Domination, Caspers, Crooked Crown, Starfire. Yeah, that's not bad. We draw into our Kid Brave and our Last Stand, not bad at all. So in this case, you'd really just normal summon out Kid Brave, and this will allow you to then either go for, well, you could easily just go for your Cross Domination, activate that, weakening one of your opponent's monsters, Kid Brave activate, getting rid of one of your cards. I'll just go with Doc in this particular circumstance, and this will obviously allow us to then draw 2 cards as a result of that, so Cord and also a Steady Hands. Nice. So we have over here, let's see, Cord by the Grave is fantastic by the way, but in this circumstance we could take Kid Brave, link it away, go for Max. So now we're going to add, I'm assuming they only have monsters, that's the logical play here, so what I'll do is I'll activate or add some spell cards instead that are relevant. I mean, you could go for Fiendish Deal if you want, not the most ideal here, but I'll go for Desperado, and we'll also go for, I think the only one we haven't got maybe would be, oh, we actually lost Crooked Crown, so I think the best here would be the Dancing Needle in this particular circumstance. Right here. So yeah, we have quite a few cards over here to respond. Definitely still okay, definitely not bad at all. But as you can see here, you definitely have plenty of resources to work with. You could even pop some of your opponent's cards, weaken their cards, and then negate as a response as well. Definitely fantastic, definitely really ideal. And although it won't necessarily win you the game in that particular turn, you could definitely still do quite a bit of things as a result to follow up on. You're getting rid of your opponent's resources, you have plenty of resources to work with your own, and even if they get rid of your monster somehow, on your following turn you have Calamity, which triggers off with any of these particular cards here, bringing back one of your monsters from the grave anyway, and triggering off more effects. For example, you could bring back Doc, you could bring back Kid Brave, and trigger off more, continuing on here, managing your resources. And that's kind of the one thing I wanted to, I guess, prove, is that this deck will maintain its resources the best compared to so many other decks out there. I mean, this deck will definitely stay consistent in this particular manner, and it just never fails. It always happens in every opening hand I try out, and yeah, it's definitely quite fantastic. It won't OTK the opponents, but you're slowly just getting rid of their resources while maintaining your own, and I can't emphasize that enough. However, with that being said, I do hope you guys enjoyed this particular video, and I hope you guys actually enjoyed this particular build for this particular deck. And if you want to share your own ideas, definitely drop it down in the comments down below as well. That also really helps other players out there. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you all have a fantastic day. I'll see you all next time.